Mr. Jason Angley was born on August 17, 1976 in Myerstown, Pennsylvania. Angley lived with his mother, father, and younger sister. His sister is 5 years younger than him. Angley's mother was a nurse for 40-plus years, and his father worked in manufacturing for 35 to 40 years. They are both retired and enjoying it. Angley went to Elko High School and graduated in 1994. Mr. Angley enlisted into the National Guard right after high school. His grandfathers, uncle, and father were all involved with the Air Force and the Navy. Angley married his current wife about 10 years before the war. Mr. Angley thought the National Guard was a good fit for him because of the family members that served before him.
All of my family members, my grandfathers, my uncle, and my dad were all in the service, so I thought that I should probably do it as well. So that was National Guard was a good fit for me at the time.
He chose Christmas to tell everyone because that was the one day everyone was together. Mr. Angley enlisted a few weeks before on December 7th. He was 17 when he joined the National Guard. Before enlisting, Mr. Angley wanted to be involved with cooking in the National Guard, but he went with manufacturing instead because of a higher pay. While enlisting in the National Guard, Angley was thinking about what the Army could do for him and what he could do for the Army. His expectations were to make a comfortable living and provide for his family.
Oh, my mom hated it because I didn't tell him. I just went and enlisted and surprised him like on Christmas Day or something.
After enlisting, Angley said his social life was a lot different, especially with his friends at home. Angley said it was just different because he had 6 to 8 months of training and they hadn't. His home life was a little bit different too because his wife got into a routine while he was in Iraq. So he had to get back into the swing of things when he got home.
It was actually a lot different because I still had, cool friends, whatever else, but they were different than I was because I went through 6-8 months of different training and they hadn't. So it was different, but a little bit of the same at the same time.
Mr. Angley planned on being in the Army his whole life, but the National Guard worked better for his family and it paid more. For training, Angley has a lot of truck driving experience as well as supply, maintenance, and firing weapons. He chose the National Guard because he wanted to help soldiers all the way around. So he helps soldiers by making their lives easier, and he helps with the vehicles they drive.
Let's see, I've done a lot of truck driving experience. I have supply maintenance experiences, ammo, firing weapons, all that good stuff.
Angley said that training was horrible and he didn't know what to expect. He was thrown into people yelling orders at him all day, every day. Even though at the time he hated it, now he expressed to my partner and I how good it was for him, and it was the best thing he could have done. For basic training, Angley went to Fort Jackson in South Carolina. He was there for 9 weeks. He said that since it was for the Army, he didn't see a whole lot of South Carolina. Angley said the food was bland and salty, but not terrible. He said during training that he did a lot of rifle training and combat training, and all sorts of other training.
We did a lot of basic soldiering stuff, rifle training, combat training, and then we went to all sorts of other training, but we did a lot of combat training.
Marching in a line was never Mr. Angley's strongest point. That is why one of the hardest drills he ever had to do was drilling ceremonies. Mr. Angley went to Fort Lee, Virginia for his specialized cooking training. Specialized cooking training taught Mr. Angley all about cooking, and he made some of the hardest dishes you could think of.
Went to Fort Lee, Virginia for my specialized cooking training.
What was the cooking training like?
It was good. It basically taught you from square one how to make simple biscuits all the way up to the fanciest steak you could think of.
Mr. Angley was not only involved with cooking, He did experience some live fire drills. They would pretend to shoot at you while you would pretend to be shot at. Being part of the military is a tough job and it can impact you emotionally. Mr. Angley wanted to go home about 2 weeks after he left. His grandfather got sick and he wanted to be home for him. His grandfather supported him and told him to stay and not come home.
Operation Iraqi Freedom was an interesting experience for Mr. Angley. He didn't know what to expect because he was never in the desert before. He was taught many good life lessons in Iraq. Mr. Angley had friends who witnessed many actions that affected them for life, but thankfully he saw nothing himself. There was a rocket attack one day about 100 yards away. Mr. Angley says it was a near-death experience.
Please tell us about your experience during Operation Iraqi Freedom.
It was pretty interesting. I didn't know what to expect. Never been to the desert until then. So we went there. It was pretty calm. We moved different places, different couple times. There was a couple rocket attacks quite a few times, couple of grenades, but something you can get past and work through. But it was a good experience. It was a life experience, a life lesson that I'll never forget. Lots of good stories and lots of good memories, but it's one of those that I only need to do once.
Mr. Angley was in good health the whole time he was in Iraq. They had a computer lab at the base that he was at. There he was able to contact his friends and family back home. It may not have been every day, but he was able to contact them a few times a week.
How did you communicate with your friends and family back at home?
Well, thankfully, the base that we were at had a computer lab where we could Facebook and Skype and all that good stuff. So every once in a while, I was able to go there and talk to them for a half hour or so, and then they could, and then I could call on a phone or whatever. So it was we could communicate very well with each other. Not every day, but maybe a couple times a week.
Mr. Angley is proud of what he did for his country and he would do it all over again if he had to. When Mr. Angley was off duty, he would mostly go to the gym because there was nothing else to do. Other than talking to his friends and family, he would work most of the time and sleep when he had the days off. The longest time he was away from his family was a full year when he was deployed in Iraq. Mr. Angley was in Newmanstown when Operation Iraqi Freedom ended, and he's been there ever since. He got home by a plane. They were flown to Harrisburg, then bused to Fort Indiantown Gap, then his wife drove him home. Mr. Angley was excited when the war was over and his family was relieved. It took him a while, but he eventually got used to living at home and not on camp.
So how did your family react when they heard the news that the war was over?
They were pretty excited because they knew now we were coming home. Because for weeks before, they was telling us that we were getting all sorts of words. Oh, you're this week, next week. But when we finally landed, it was over. They were all excited.
How did your family and community greet you?
Well, my family, big hugs, naturally, big hugs and kisses all the way around. So that was good. And the community was great. My friends and family were great. Nice big little party when we got home. So it was very cool.
Getting home from Operation Iraqi Freedom, it took about 6 to 7 months for Angley to get fully adjusted back to a normal life. Angley talked about how sometimes it was difficult because of balancing a normal job and his family after he got back. Since Angley is still involved with the National Guard, his job now is to help with supply. He orders soldiers food, ammo, uniforms, and helps maintain their vehicles and property. Since Angley is still involved with the National Guard, he sees most of the guys he served with every day since he works with them.
So does the war affect your life today?
I think in some ways it does. I don't see how it couldn't. I'm sure there's times where I act crazier than normal, but I think there's probably be always that after effect that it'll affect for who knows how long.
Mr. Angley does have some after effects due to his involvement in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He doesn't like having his back to the door and not knowing where he is in a crowd or wherever else he is. Along with those, he also views some political issues differently and some society issues differently as well. After returning from the war, he was able to keep his uniform. Mr. Angley says he keeps his uniform in his attic so it doesn't get ruined. Angley learned life lessons from the war as well, such as keep moving forward. Angley said that if he were to fully retire from the National Guard, then he would be wanting to go back the very next day. Within the next 5 years, Mr. Angley does plan to retire and enjoy it, maybe even travel. He doesn't know for sure yet. He does not attend any reunions, but he hopes to soon. Mr. Angley isn't involved with any organizations regarding the National Guard, but he hopes to be at some point.
So, do you have any plans for retirement anytime soon?
Not soon, but in the next 5 years I will. As soon as, but I don't know what I'm going to do after that. So I'm just going to probably enjoy it for a while, maybe travel a little bit, and then we'll see what happens.
Do you attend any reunions? If so, how many per year? And please explain what goes on at the reunion.
I haven't attended any yet, but I will, and I can only imagine what's going to go on there. I'm sure it'll be fun.
Are you involved in any organizations regarding the National Guard? If so, please explain.
I'm unfortunately not, and I should be. I should do a few more of those, but I do plan on it here shortly.